Hello and welcome to the Blessings in the Streets podcast. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts, and in studio with me this evening is a phenomenal woman that she is a woman of many hats, just doing all kind of works of God, allowing her to be used in a mighty and magnificent way. She's a wife, she's a mom, national best-selling author, she's a pastor, publisher, journalist, media personality. I mean, as I'm telling you, I mean, the list goes on and on. But again, she's walking on her purpose. She's doing the works as God has led her to do, and she's taking time out of a very busy schedule to hang out with us this evening to share a little bit of her story, a little bit of her journey, with the hopes of encouraging and inspiring and uplifting others, especially when it comes to dealing with the challenges and adversities of life. So it is my privilege and honor, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce to you our special guest this evening, Dr. Kendra Norman Holmes. Kendra, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before we jump into our segments for this evening, I do want to give you an opportunity to share a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, what you do. Kind of give our audience a taste of who is Dr. Kendra Norman Holmes.
I tell people a lot of times that when I start talking about my bio and the things that I am doing, I almost get tired talking about it. So I know that, God gives me the strength and he gives me the wherewithal and he, provides me everything that I need to carry out the assignments that he has really placed on my life because I do have a very full plate. And I look back over it sometimes and I realize that my entire life basically is ministry. And so it's like all of the ideas and things that God feeds into me, some way, somehow, they all seem to go back to ministry in some way or another. And not just ministry, but it is really sharing the goodness of God. God has given me a passion for sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. There's so much negativity that's going on in the world, and people don't have to look for bad news at all. It meets them in the morning when they open their eyes. They watch the morning news, you pick up the newspaper, you go on your computer and look at the screen, you're going to get some bad news. That's going to be the first news that you get. But God has given me a passion for finding those things that uplift people, those things that are going to build them up, those things that are going to encourage them and inspire them and be able to share those things with them. So that's really what I see myself as a person that God really uses to inspire the world as best that I can, to share his good news as best that I can, and at the end of the day to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem, and to light that shines in the midst of darkness. So whether it is me being a pastor of a church congregation, or me putting together my newspaper that I put together, me writing the books, whether it's fiction or nonfiction that I'm writing, me working with the Greek letter mystery that God has given me, whatever those things are, they're all pointing toward uplifting and building up and being a help to the world. And I think that, we need more hands on in that area to actually help to the world.
Love that. Love that. Very well said. And again, to my audience, as you can hear, Kendra's got her hands in a lot of different things, and it
Thank
all
you.
boils down to ministry work is what it is.
Mhm.
She's not just busy. She's just not, making moves, but she's actually being proactive, being intentional about walking in her faith and again, doing things that are pleasing to God and making her mark on this world in his name, giving him the glory in the process. Now, one of the things that you mentioned that I'm sure our listeners probably picked up on, but they weren't quite sure about. That I do want to give you an opportunity to share. As you mentioned about starting a Greek letter organization, which of course I am a part of as well. If you would share with our audience what that is all about, and kind of give them some backdrop on what this how this vision came about and what is it all about.
Yeah, okay. And I love talking about it. So I'm glad you laid that out there and made that opportunity. So the Greek letter ministry is called Rho Alpha Tau Incorporated. And it is an idea that God really planted in my heart years ago, like 15, 20 years ago. I don't know. It's been a long time that he really placed it in my heart to begin with. But I didn't see it as something God was giving me. I really took it as a joke. And for a long time, I would tell people, oh, I'm going to start this Greek letter ministry, and it's going to be called Roy Fatah. And I would, be joking about it. I'd have them laughing about it, and did that for years. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that the Lord made it very clear to me that He was not playing. That this is something that He really wanted me to do, and it's something that I had to walk through even in the midst of adversity. I've recently had a young lady to contact me on Facebook, and her view of it was that all Greek letter organizations were sinful, that I needed to go and check to see what the Holy Spirit really was telling me, because she didn't believe that God was really leading me to start a Greek letter ministry. And I don't even tell you, I don't go to toe with people when it comes to things like that, because I fully believe that when God gives us something, we've got the voice of God, because when we listen to people, we can easily be turned away from things that God has told us to do, because there are other people who are unbelieving or don't, believe that God told us that. That's why we need to know the voice of God ourselves. And so I even try to go to battle with her. I just told her that, I know the voice of God, and I didn't search after God for Roy Fatah. God searched me out to start Roy Fatah. And so I know that it was a divine assignment given by Him. And so we started Greek letter ministry in 2023 and just celebrated our second year. And this ministry is really all about, our motto is our hands, God's work. And so it's really about allowing God to use our hands to do His work in our communities, in and around our communities, us doing the work of Jesus Christ, the same things that we saw and that we continue to see that Jesus did in the Word of God. Those are the things that we want God to use us to do. And we are an international organization now. And so we've gone global, because we did recently get a chapter started in Africa. And so we have a chapter in Africa, and we have about 13 full chapters within the United States and different states. And this is a fellowship. I tell people it's not a sisterhood, it's not a brotherhood, it's a disciplehood. It comprises of men, women, people of all races, people from different walks of life. You don't have to have a college degree. You don't have to have the things that a lot of the other Greek letter organizations would require that you have, because it's not about that. What you need to have is Christ in your heart, and you need to have be someone who has surrendered the gifts that God has given you to Him, so that you allow Him to use your gifts. He gave you those gifts, you give them back to Him, and you allow Him to direct your paths where those gifts are concerned, so that whatever you are doing with your gifts are things that edify and glorify and satisfy the kingdom of God. And so that's really what we are all about. And so I had someone to reach out to me not long after I started the organization. A Caucasian sister actually reached out to me when I posted a picture that I had put together online, and she just looked at it, and it resonated with me, and it has stuck with me, because she looked at it and she saw men and women, older people, younger people, Black people, white people. She saw them mixed together, and she just said, "This must be what heaven looks like." Those were words to me when she looked at it. And she said, when she looked at other Greek letter affiliations, there is so much a segregation, so to speak, in it, because everybody's going to be female, or everybody's going to be male, everybody's going to be white, everybody's going to be Black, because they have these stipulations that are there, whereas you see it all when you look at Roy Fatah. And so this is a fellowship that I'm always encouraging people, even if you've been one that have shied away from other Greek letter organizations because of maybe what your belief systems are regarding those. I encourage people to go and check out royfatah.org, read what it's all about, see what we're out and what we're doing. And if we're a good fit for you, then reach out to us. We'd love to have you to come and be a part. Before it's over, I want us to be everywhere. I want to be in all 50 states and go beyond, because to me, it's not about me trying to outnumber anybody else or be larger than anybody else. But the more chapters we have and the more areas that we are in, for me, that means that's the more work that we are doing for the kingdom of God. That means that we have infiltrated other areas. We have broken new ground. We have allowed God to enlarge our territory. And we're going into areas as the Bible directs us to go into all the world and preach the gospel. And so that's what it's really all about. And so that's what Royal Fatah is all about. And I'm just thrilled to have, frats like to have sorors like the ladies that we have that are everywhere. Many of us have never met each other, but we still have that disciplehood where we connect because we're all connected by Jesus Christ. And so I'm just excited as to where God is going to take Royal Fatah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Wonderful organization, and yeah, if I'm guilty of a shameless plug, then I'm guilty of that. But it's all about promoting who God is, and and we're well aware of the conversations that have taken place about Greek letter organizations in general, and whether or not that is anti, what God represents, and but I think instead of focusing on the, I guess, the Greek letter aspect of it, focus on the
Hmm.
mission of what the organization is about, because even if it wasn't a Greek letter
Exactly.
organization and it was just a group of men and women who come together, the purpose of it is to glorify God, is to do works that represent who he is. So if you got an issue with that, if your only hang up is that it has some Greek letters associated with it, then maybe the hang up is probably more with that individual than it is understanding the true meaning of what that organization represents, because we're not talking about an organization that is about secret handshakes and
None of that.
idolizing
Mm-mm.
any particular things or anything like that. It's all about, again, glorifying God and doing works, and it's just like just a common group of, like you said, a fellowship of men and women of all backgrounds, all ages, all demographics, if you will, just coming together with a common love for Christ and wanting to
Right.
just represent him
Right.
in the highest level. And in these days and times, we definitely need more of that fellowship, more of that unification, regardless of
Right.
whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
So
hmm And
again, I
know
would
what?
definitely.
Joseph, one of the things that made me really know that God was behind it was that I did not even realize all of the individual hangups that, especially the faith community had, where Greek letter organizations were concerned. I knew that there were some. I just didn't know the details and the intricate details of what those hangups were. But then when I learned it and I saw the whole path that God took me on when it came to building the foundation for Ro Fatah, I really began to see God's hand in it because it erased all of that, like the secret handshakes and the secret passwords, and all of these different things that they have. That these were the intricate details of a lot of the hangups and problems that the Christian community had with them. Well, Ro Fatah does not have any of those things. We don't have it. There's nothing secretive about it. I tell people all the time, we want to be very loud, bold, and strong with all of our declarations and everything that we have. And there is no pledge that people are making to the fellowship itself. There is no pledge. And with other Greek letter organizations, you make to the organization, sometimes saying you'll give your life for it and you'll, give up everything for it and all of these things that you're saying in there. So I understand, some of the hangups that people have. In Royal Fatah, we don't have that. We have a pledge, but the pledge is very public and the pledge is all to God. There is no pledge to the organization itself. People can get out of it whenever they want to get out of it. Nobody has to go into all big denouncing stuff and going into this big thing. If you don't want to be a part of it, guess what? We don't want you there. We want the people that we want to be there are people that we want to be there. The people who want to be there are the ones that need to be there. If they find that it's not a fit for them and they decide that they don't want to be there, then that's fine for them to do that. And so, it just seemed as God gave me the idea and gave me all of the building blocks for Ro Alpha Tau, he really gave me the blocks that just annihilated all of those quirks and the hangups that people had with Greek letter fellowships and organizations. And so I'm just very thankful for it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, this is definitely a conversation about, Greek letter organizations and how that applies to the Bible or doesn't apply. I mean, that's a different conversation for a different day. We just wanted to put that out there and let you know that there are alternatives such as this that exist, and it's definitely a different spin on what has traditionally been your, Greek letter organizations, whether they are predominantly, they're historically black organizations, or even if they're historically white organizations. The bottom line is about unifying together to glorify God, and anybody that's looking to do something like that in any platform in any way, you have to celebrate that. You have to acknowledge that, and I'm thankful that God put that vision on you, placed that vision in your heart to say, hey, let's bring some brothers and sisters together and find other ways to think outside of the box in reaching in spreading the
Yeah.
love of God, in reaching people who maybe don't know God the way some of us do, because there's plenty of lost people out there who are just kind of wandering around doing life on their own, and they don't know that there is a guy here that wants to connect with them, that wants to be in relationship with them. So Royal Alpha Tau is an opportunity. It's one of many, creative, out of the box type of thinking, type of formats that can provide such a venue, such a place, such a safe space, if you will, for people to come
Yes.
together with that common cause. So, yeah, this is great stuff, and again, I'm glad that God placed it on your heart to do so. So, with that said, we're gonna jump. Now we have our commercial break. We're gonna jump back to the Dr. Kendra story. So,
Okay.
Kendra, anytime I should say, when I bring guests on the show and we begin to talk about our stories, our journeys, one of the things that I really like to do is take an opportunity, to kind of reflect on that story, but by going back to the beginnings of where it starts, because I do believe that a lot of things that go on early on in life, even as far back as our childhood, whether it's the people that we meet, whether it's the certain events in our lives that happen, good, bad, or otherwise, that while we may not understand why all of those things are going on at that particular point in time, we may not make sense of it all. A lot of it does ultimately connect to where we are when we fast forward in life to the present day. So when I think about somebody like you walking in your purpose, walking in your calling, doing all of these great and magnificent works, I believe that a lot of that was the building up of it, the preparation process of a lot of it. There were some things that probably went on early in life that were sort of the stepping stones, if you will, that kind of led you up to that point. So, with that said, if you would share with us, what was it like for you growing up? Fond memories that you have about growing up, as well as if there's any particular challenges that come to mind, you can share those as well. Kind of give us the foundational basis of where your story begins.
Yeah, I mean, and I totally agree with your outlook on that. I think that when you look at people's today and you go back and you look at their yesterday, you can kind of connect some blocks, and some things will make sense, for how they turned out. And so I am the product of two preachers. So I grew up in a very staunch Christian home. And so my dad, who is still alive, is 86 years old now, and he still preaches. He's moving a lot slower, but driving faster. But he's still preaching. Just I just be worried about him on the roads now. But my mother passed away back in 2014. But my dad, when I look at him, people will often say, my husband even says it sometime, that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, because I feel like I'm a whole lot like my father. I feel like his entire life pretty much was poured in ministry. And so, we grew up, you would hear people say things like preachers have the worst kids. Well, I would always come behind them and say, well, unless you were Bishop Norman's kids,
Mm,
because my daddy wasn't having that. He was never called to the school on any of us. We never, gave my parents any problems. We were not disrespectful. We did not. People will say, if you bring your children up in the church and, in a staunch Christian home, as soon as they're able to break free, they're going to go, wow, they're going to do that. Did not happen with us. And there are five of us, with my siblings and myself. And of those five, three of us are in ministry. And the other two that are not in ministry as far as pulpit ordained type ministry, they still work within ministries in church. We're all still church. We're all adults now. All except one of us is married and have families, and our families have ministry within those families. And so, I grew up, I would say that in the time that I was there as a child, I didn't really appreciate it, because I couldn't do the things that other kids did at school. I couldn't go where they went. I couldn't. I remember, thinking that, okay, when I get to be a senior, I'm going to be able to go to the senior prom. Well, the senior prom was on Friday night. Guess what? We had church on Friday night. And my dad was like, you're not missing church. to go to a prom or to do whatever. And so, there were things that, even he looks back on them now and he says, well, I probably was a little tougher on you all. I had to be. But while that may be true, I don't think there was ever a time when we ever thought it was anything other than love. I don't think there was ever a time that we felt that we were being held back or felt that we were in any way, being smothered by parents or anything like that. But it's just, I think that it molded us into what we are today. And even if there were times back then that we wished we could do something differently, I think that if you were to ask me or my four other siblings now at this stage, are we thankful for how we were raised? Absolutely. Because we have classmates that we can look back on now who were able to do all those things and had lives that at that time we might have looked at it and said, man, I wish I could do this, or I wish. But when you see their lives now, or when you see where they are now, or where that life took them, then we can look at it and say, we're very grateful that our parents were the way that they were. But we were church kids. We grew up in church. And when I say grew up in church, I mean we grew up in church. We had, nowadays most churches have church on Sundays, and sometimes that's it. We had Sunday morning and Sunday night, and we had Bible study, and we had, prayer meetings, and we had, all of these things, that choir rehearsal, and, all of this stuff that had us in church probably about 4 or 5 nights out of the week, having to do something, with the church. But I am just so very grateful at this point, because I believe even in all of that, God was preparing me for my today. All of the hardships and all of the trials and everything that I've had to go through in my life, I don't think I would have been prepared for them if my yesterday had not been what it was. And so I'm very grateful for it.
Love that, and to what you just said. I mean, it's a different day and time. I mean, and like you said, yeah, you grew up in a very strict household,
Yeah.
but at the same time, like you stated, as we reflect back on our today, and you look back to those friends and in the neighborhood and in school or whatever that were kind of allowed to do whatever. It seemed like that they were having all the fun and they were getting to do this, that, or
Hmm.
the other, and here we were stuck in the house or stuck at church or whatever. You have a greater appreciation for that later on,
Oh,
unfortunately, when you see how the lives of some of those individuals turned out, whether they're no longer with us or whether they're locked up or they just simply just got led astray and really had no sense of purpose or direction. And it's not that we're tooting our own horns or bragging. It's just that we're understanding the value and the blessing in having parents who were concerned about making sure that they did the best that they could to raise you and create an environment that was nurturing, that was supportive, that was encouraging, but most importantly, that was disciplined in the sense
yes.
that you would be, as you stated, you would be prepared that when things did get shaky, when things did get rough, when trials did come, that you'd be able to withstand, you'd be able to navigate through. Not
Yeah.
just because you were disciplined, but because of what you were disciplined in, and you
Yes.
being raised as you were disciplined and dependent upon God. So
Right.
when hard times came, you're going to be less likely to go into panic mode. You're going to be less likely to go into freak out mode because
Right.
you know who ultimately is in charge. You know who's ultimately running the show here, and that does
Exactly.
make a difference. That does
It
make a
does.
difference. So,
Hmm.
you know, you know, I didn't necessarily grow up in as strict of an environment as you did in terms of church, but church was very important in my home. I didn't get a chance to compromise whether or not I felt like going to church on Sunday morning. That was not a it was not a choice that I got a chance. I was
Right.
going and I was going to
Right.
look a certain way. I didn't get a chance to just pick whatever I felt like wearing, because
Hmm.
back in the day, and I joke about this all the time, bringing it up with people, kind of in our age bracket. It was like you had three sets of clothes back in the day. You had school clothes, play clothes, and church clothes. And,
Right.
and so when you went to church, you wore your church
Your
clothes.
church
The
clothes.
only other
That's right.
you wore your church clothes, and you was gonna be suited and booted at church. And as soon
Hmm.
as you got out
Hmm.
of church, you better come up out them church clothes. Don't get those
Right.
church clothes messed up. But it was, but
Yep.
it was, but even then, it was about a reverence to the presence of God. It wasn't even about let
Exactly.
me show off my fancy clothes. It was a
Hmm.
respect thing,
Yeah.
So if you having some tighter rules growing up allowed you to become a respectful, disciplined, honorable, a high integrity, high character individual, I don't think that's an L for you. I think
No,
that's a big
no.
win, and it opens
Yes.
up the door for you to be able to do all type of things. God can use you in a mighty way, as He's doing, just because of the foundational basis of how you were brought up. I mean,
Yeah.
that's all that in itself is impactful. It's powerful, and that's why I like having this conversation, because again, we fast forward to present day. You wouldn't be able to do all the great things that you've been able to do had you not had, again,
No.
those pillars put into place on how you were going to be raised, how you would conduct yourself, not only as a young lady but ultimately as a woman of God, and again, lining up the way that God would have you to do. Do we make mistakes? Do we fall short sometimes? Absolutely, we do.
Yeah.
Nobody's
Absolutely.
perfect. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we sometimes we slip up and say, think, and or do something we ain't got no business saying, thinking, and or
Right.
doing. But
Right.
but we serve a God also that understands that He forgives us, He loves us, He'll dust us off and say, let's get back on track and let's keep on moving forward
Yeah.
and doing what we're doing. So,
Right.
appreciate you sharing that. Absolutely. So, Kendra, as I'm sure again, you had a wonderful childhood. You grow up, and in the process of just living life and getting older, the experiences, they still come our way, good, bad, or otherwise. But every now and then, and I always say this, every now and then, if you live long enough, you're going to get hit with some storms, and some of those storms are going to hit you in a way where it literally just kind of knocks you off your feet. It kind of knocks the wind out of you, so to speak, to the point where when you're going through that particular valley experience, that storm of life, you might find yourself feeling like, you know what, how am I going to get out of this? How am I supposed to
Mm-hmm.
overcome this? Even somebody like yourself having, foundational roots in the church, 4 or 5 times a week, both parents, preachers, even in other words, even followers of Christ, even believers go through their struggles and
Oh
worries and
yeah.
concerns and fears and
Oh yeah.
anxieties. So don't get it
Mm-hmm.
confused that even believers don't
Mm-mm.
go through that. So with that said, tell us about a time where you felt like that, where you felt helpless, you felt hopeless, you felt like this particular moment of adversity, this challenge before me is something that I don't know how I'm going to get through this. I don't know how I'm going to work around this. I don't know what prayer to say. I don't know what to ask for to make it go all, make it all go away. Obviously, you're here today, so we can trust that
Mm.
God, whatever this story that you're about to share with us, that God worked it out. But maybe back then you had your doubts, you had your fears, you had your
Oh
worries.
yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
if you would kind of tell us about a time like that for you, and what was ultimately the turning point where you saw some light at the end of the tunnel and coming up out of it.
Yeah. I do think we all have those stories. I think some of our stories are I don't want to say worse than others, but some of our struggles have been harder than others. Some of us have testimonies that that go a little bit deeper than others of us have, where testimonies are concerned. But certainly being brought up in church, and even I got saved at the age of 12, so I was very young when I came to know Christ as my personal Savior. So even being brought up in church, and church is almost all I knew, and getting saved at the age of 12, not being involved in things that a lot of other kids were involved in growing up and all of that, that does not exempt you from life. The life still lives. And so, you still have to deal with those things. And for me, even to date, say that probably the biggest struggle that I had in my life, or the biggest trial that I had in my life, happened when I was yet in my mid 20s, really, in that during that time. And I had gotten married. I got married at the age of 21, when I married my first husband, and I actually got married. And then by the time I was 20, oh gosh, what was I, 27, 8, I was a widow. And so I had to go through the loss of the person that I saw was just like that was the love of my life. And so to actually go through loss and not really be prepared for that at that moment, that left me being a widow at the age of like 28 years old with two toddler little girls that I had, because we had two little girls. And after I gave birth to our second daughter, um, very short, I think she was like 2 weeks old, when my husband suddenly fell very ill, and we didn't know really what was going on with him. And they put him in the hospital. It got where he could not eat anything. He had an infection that set down in his throat, and he was the pastor. He was the youth pastor at the church and everything. He had this infection that set in his throat. He couldn't eat anything. So then he started dehydrating. And at the time he started dehydrating, his joints started locking up. And literally my father-in-law at that time, his dad, came to our house and had to pick him up and put him in the car and take him to the emergency room because he couldn't get up to walk. His joints were locked. Got him there to the hospital, ran all of these tests. They ran just countless tests, test after test. Everything was coming up negative that they were doing well. They finally had a positive test that came out with all of the things that they were running. And I remember that day we all came to the hospital and the doctor came in the room and just stood there and was talking to us and just told us that just want you to know that we ran an HIV AIDS test. And this was back in 1992, I believe it was, that this test had been run on, and they'd ran HIV test, and he has full-blown AIDS. Not that he was HIV positive, but he had full-blown AIDS. And according to the doctor, he had, by the age he was in, he had probably had it for 10 years. Mind you, been married for 4.5 and had 2 children. So the whole entire time we had been married, carrying the HIV AIDS virus. And we traced it back to a blood transfusion that he had in college when he had to have an operation. This was in the early days of AIDS and HIV. People didn't know, a whole lot about it, but the immediate, the thing that made it become so difficult for me was that they didn't tell us he was HIV positive. They said he had full-blown AIDS, and they gave him 3 days to 3 weeks to live. From the moment they told us, they said he had 3 days to 3 weeks to live for the stage he was in. God blessed him. My dad prayed over him. The church prayed over him. God blessed him to come back up to what looked like health. If you looked out for outside of his body, looked full health. He lived for 3 years instead of 3 days to 3 weeks, as the doctor said. They released him from the hospital, told us to take him home for him to die, and God raised him up. He preached like a madman during those 3 years that God gave him and all of that. But when he passed away, I was not ready, because in my mind, God was going to heal him. That's all I was believing God for, was his healing. And so when he passed away, it put me in a place of this. I didn't realize it, but I was in a very depressed state of mind. I didn't realize that that's what it was. What I did was I basically would not look at the problem. I refused to grieve. So when he passed away, I didn't want to take any time off from work. I didn't want to, I jumped in his shoes and took a choir at church. I made myself so busy. I enrolled in college. I did stuff so that I had not 1 minute of availability during the day to really think about what I had just gone through. And so we had the funeral, we buried him, we did all, and I went on with life like nothing was wrong. And so we're just looking at me saying, gosh, she's the strongest woman I have ever seen. But they didn't realize I was dying on the inside. Like I was really dying on the inside, but was not letting anybody know, because in front of everybody, I was smiling. I'm, going to church. I'm going to work. I'm doing all this stuff. They see me excelling in school. When I graduated from college, I was at the top of my class. I was an honor graduate when I graduated from college, because I buried myself in books. I buried myself into anything that would take my mind away from what had really happened. So it was 4 years later when I finally grieved of the death. He had dead for 4 years when I finally grieved that death. And the way I grieved, Joseph, was that I sat down and I started writing. That was the start of my writing career. I sat down, took a new computer that I had received, I think for Christmas or something. I sat down and I started writing, and the first words I typed out, and I shall not die. And I shall not die was the title of one of the last messages that my husband had preached. And his message said, if God heals me, I'm going to live here. And if he takes me, I'm going to live there. So either way, I shall not die. What's the time? And those were the words I typed. And then I started typing out the feelings that I had never expressed to anybody. And so what was supposed to be just like this little journal entry or something that I was putting together, ended like 30 days later, 100 pages of me just crying and typing. I was typing out the anger, the hurt, everything. I was putting it all on paper, and it became a healing mechanism for me. It became very therapeutic for me. When I finished writing that 100-page therapeutic pouring out that I actually did, I did not want to stop writing, because my thought process at that point was writing just healed me. Writing just made me feel better. God used my own writing to help to heal a hurt that I had not even told people about. Now I want God to use my writing to heal other people. And so I just kept writing and kept writing. And here we are still writing, these years later, writing books that are meant to make people heal, to make them whole, to encourage them, all while entertaining or whatever, but to offer them Christ, throughout all of it. And so that's where my writing journey actually began. It began as a part of pain. I ended up writing a book called The Path from Pain to Purpose. And so it was like what started out as my pain became my purpose, and God allowed me to continue to do it.
Wow. Wow. Let me first start off by saying I totally appreciate your transparency and sharing that. Even after all of this time, I know this can't be easy to talk about, but it's just amazing how God can use some of our most darkest seasons of
Absolutely.
life, and from that turn out a blessing.
Yeah,
From that,
and not even,
set you down a
it
path.
was like it turned out to be such this earth shattering like testimony. Because like I said, he
Mm-hmm.
had this when he and I met. He had this when he and I married.
Mm-hmm.
We were married 4.5, almost 5 years. I had given birth to two children. And so the doctors could not believe. They started flying to places to have my blood drawn to find out why I never contracted
Mm-hmm.
this HIV AIDS virus, because you're talking about not one time of unprotected sex, of protected sex, not one time of protected sex. There was no safe sex. We were married. And so we were not, we didn't know that he was carrying a virus. So there's not one time that I protected myself from receiving this virus, yet 4.5 years of unprotected sex with a man who had full-blown AIDS, and I gave birth to two children, yet God covered me and my children. And so it was just a testament of God's grace and mercy when you are, walking with God and doing, what God will have you to do. Yes, God ultimately took him, he did do that, but he, even through that, he performed a miracle, because literally, if you could have seen him, he looked like a skeleton with just was covered with skin. So it was like you could see every bone in his body. That's how bad it had gotten. Yet God allowed him to pick up all of his weight to get back to full health for the time that he gave him. He never was sick another day until God took him. So he was not sickly. That was not a sickly 3 years. He's fully pre-singing, traveling, doing, what God had called him to do. It was almost like he knew he was on borrowed time. So whatever time God was going to give him, he was going to give it all to God. And that's what he did. And when God decided to take him, God took him at that time. But our whole family became a testimony and testament of God's grace and his mercy. And so that's why I refuse to compromise, with the devil or with anybody, because I know, the God I serve, and I know where he has brought me from. And I believe that he preserved me for such a time as this. And so I'm going to give him all his due.
Wow. Like I said, I mean, as you were sharing all of that, I'm thinking the same thing as when I said, what a blessing this was, because that was the first thing I'm thinking is like unprotected, 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
and if you'd have wrote this out on paper, then
Nobody
he's
would believe it.
gone, you
Mm-hmm.
gone, your
Mm-hmm.
kids gone, but yet
Mm-hmm.
you were untouched, you were
Mm-hmm.
covered,
Yep.
and even after such a devastating diagnosis where he's looking like he's again like you said 72 hours away from the grave,
Mm-hmm.
not only did I bless it, not only did he get blessed with 3 more years, but he was
Mm-hmm.
brought back to what
through
appeared to
very
be full
healthy
strength,
years. Yes.
like as if nothing was
Yes.
wrong.
Like as if
So it's
as if
like,
nothing was wrong. As if
how
nothing
does
was
that
wrong.
happen?
Yep.
And again, and I say that, rhetorically, is, it
Hmm.
happens because
Yep.
of who's running the show here, because
Yep. Yep.
you can't call what you just shared anything else but God. You
Yeah.
can't call
It's,
it
you
anything.
can't
You can't
explain it
say it was
away.
luck. You
It
can't say it's
can't.
some medical miracle.
Yep.
This
Because
is
even
beyond.
the doctors couldn't. They could
Yeah,
not
they can't
explain
explain
it.
that.
They could not explain because the thing is that they didn't even have to test my daughters because my daughters would have had to have gotten it from me. They would have
Mm-hmm.
had to have gotten it through childbirth. So
Right.
when they are testing me and flying me to Atlanta and trying to figure out, why I was not HIV. They kept saying we're going to go ahead and start treating your children now because we know they have it, and we're going to go ahead and start treating you now because we know you have it. There's no way you don't have it. Well, yes, there was a way that we didn't have it because
Mm-hmm.
me nor the children. God protect all of us, and so they even know. My daughters now are grown and married and have children of their own. But they know the whole story and they know how blessed they are. They know that they are walking miracles just like I am. And so they probably worship God just about as hard as I do, because we
Yeah.
all know, we all know, we know.
And especially with the time that you're talking about, we're talking about, at the time that you would have given birth, this would have been in the early
Yep.
days of
Yep.
AIDS,
Mm-hmm.
when,
Mm-hmm.
medical understanding
Yep.
and procedures and medicines available and things of that nature just weren't
Mm-hmm. They weren't there at that
there.
time. They were
So we're
not.
in the very rawness of what is this
Yes.
crazy, kind of similar to like how we responded to COVID when it first came. Like, what
Yeah.
is
Mm-hmm.
this horrific disease that just kind of takes you
Yep.
out, and we don't know
Yep.
how to navigate through this. We don't know how to preserve life from this, and yet here you were covered. But
Yep.
again, this is it all go to me. It all goes back to the beginnings. It all goes back to how you came up, knowing Christ at an early age, and devoting your life accordingly to Him. The benefits of that, when you are dedicated to God, He covers you, even not only in the moments that you can see what's going on right now, but something that was going to take place years from now that you
Yep.
had no idea was coming. He
Did
already had you
not.
covered for that,
Mm-hmm.
because he had work for you to do. There was still things, and
Right.
he needed it. But more importantly, he needed you to have a personal testimony that was going to allow you to be able to be catapulted in that work. Like you and I both know, and you know even better than me because of the many works that you've done in terms of writings. You know, there's hundreds of thousands of people who write,
Yeah.
but everybody doesn't necessarily write because based off of a testimony. And in
Right.
your scenario, you're able to write off of your own personal testimony, which makes your writings be relatable to people
Mm-hmm.
who are experiencing you, because now they know that you just didn't sit down and just came up with some random creative stuff. You're speaking from a place, like you said, a place of healing. You're speaking from
Yes.
a place of pain. It's like you've been there and done that. So now if I'm somebody who is going through, and I get in contact with you, you now can pour into me in a way that maybe the next person couldn't do, because
Right.
you've had a personal deep encounter. But again, God had to let you go through that. And this is what, for
Yeah.
those tuning in who don't understand, a lot of our storms in life, if when we look at it from a worldly perspective, we look at we put ourselves in a victim seat. It's kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, why is this happening to me? Woe is me, and
Right.
that kind of thing. Not understanding that when you look at it from your storms from a godly perspective, then you understand that God has to allow certain things to come in your life, not because He's trying to harm you or destroy you or take you out, but He has to allow you to experience that for what He's preparing you in terms of the works that you're going to be doing later on. So, in other words, simply put, most of many of the storms that come your way, it's not even about you. It's
Mm-mm.
about what God is trying to prepare you for the works
Yep.
that He's going to have you do for other people.
Yep.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
your storm today could be a blessing for somebody that you're not going to even meet for 10 years from now. But you had
Mm-hmm.
to go through it now so you could be ready to come alongside them 10 years from now. That person that you don't know, you've never seen before, but you're going to run into them by divine design, and you're going to be able to pour into them in some way, whether it's you verbally talking to them, whether it's in your writings, somehow, some way, you're going to be able to connect with them and help them with their healing process. You're going to be able to help them with being able to, deal with the whole devastation of the trauma in that moment. So,
Right.
again, all we can just say is, is God is good. I mean, this is
Yep.
what a powerful testimony, and I appreciate you sharing that. This is definitely blessing some people, and including myself. This is great. So thank you so much for sharing that testimony. So
Absolutely.
so Kendra, I mean, obviously you've shared some very deep stuff here, but as you stated, sometimes our storms are deep like that, and sometimes it's just the nuances of lifing type things. But nevertheless, one of the things that I am interested in finding out from you is when you do find yourself facing moments of adversity, moments of challenge, and storms of life, what is it that you personally like to do when you find yourself, if in those situations? If it's just one of those days that something's going on, major or minor, but you got to deal with it. It's an adverse moment. It's a challenge. What do you like to do to kind of help you keep a level and focused approach as you process through whatever it is that you're up against?
Yeah, I I'm in this I don't know if you want to call it a phase of life or a mindset or whatever, but I am in this place. God has me in this place of just thirsting for peace, just
Mm,
having a peace of mind. So, when things come that I see as things that are being sent to disturb my peace or to in some way, get me off course or distract me, in some whatever, I find myself just almost immediately turning to God. Just I see it as a device of the enemy that's just trying to throw me off course. That is in some way, for whatever reason, it's all I almost feel like I am such a threat to the enemy that he has to try to come up with some way to disturb my peace if he's going to throw me off track or to get my focus off of where God really wants me to go. And so I will just immediately just start praying, whether it's within myself or aloud. I've got, in places where I'm blessed to work environment where I'm in an office setting by myself. I have a whole side of a building pretty much that's by myself because the team that I work with are out in the field. They're doing things, they're not in the building. And so I will sometimes get up from my desk in the middle of a work day and just start walking around the workplace and just praying, just praying. And so I find myself doing a lot of meditation, find myself doing a lot of praying, and I find a lot of solace in writing. I'll sit down and start writing something. Sometimes whatever I'm writing about turns into a message that I can share with congregation during a Sunday morning worship experience, because I know whatever it is that I am dealing with, it's not, personal to me. It's not like I'm the only one that's going to deal with that. So if God's giving me a breakthrough from something personal that I'm having to be faced with, then I feel like there's somebody else that could be facing that same thing. And maybe what God has given me can also be a tool to help them find their way out of it. And so oftentimes it ends up turning into something that I can share during a Sunday morning sermon. But I find a lot of, even now, even from back then where I found that writing was very therapeutic for me, today, I find that sitting down and writing out some things, as I'm feeling those particular things and I'm writing them, even as I may be writing out a prayer, I may be writing out a thought, I may be writing out something that ends up sounding like a devotion to me as I go back and read it later on. But I find myself writing those things out, going back and looking at them again. But I've just learned to really to depend on God. I've been through so much, in my life that God has brought me through, that I've got to the point where, it's very hard to make me discouraged or to make me doubt what God is going to do or what God is able to do, because I've just seen him do too much. It's that my dad used to sing this song, said, "You can't make me doubt him because I know too much about him." And so, that's where I am. You can't make me doubt God because I know too much about him.
Love that. Love that. Definitely a great approach. And again, you're clearly somebody who, and I always like to highlight this, is you're clearly somebody who's of the mindset that you don't wait until the storm has arrived to start,
Oh yeah.
dealing with it. You are
Mhm.
somebody who is, set yourself up to where this is a lifestyle, whether it's a lifestyle of
Yes.
prayer, where it's a lifestyle of studying God's word, where it's just a lifestyle of staying ready so that when the storm comes, because as we all know, there's no way to predict the timing of a storm. There's no way to predict the level of intensity that storm is going to bring. But you want to be in a situation where you're not reactive, but instead that you're
Mhm.
responsive. That I'm
Right.
already ready for it. So then I can get
Mhm.
hit by that storm, and I can withstand the hit. I can get hit by that storm, and still know that when it's all over with, as I'm walking through it with him, by locked arms with me, that I'll actually still be standing upright. I'll actually be
Yes.
stronger. I'll actually be better. I'll actually be wiser than what I
Mhm.
was before the storm even came. So that's when you know, when something that was meant to destroy you, that was meant to take you out, that when you approach it the way that God would have you to do it, with Him, of course, that when it's over, to think that you actually come out better as a result of the
Mm.
storm, that's not
Mhm.
worldly thinking, but that's why you don't want to look at it through worldly lenses. You got to start looking at your storms through godly lenses, because
That's
when you
right.
approach it that way, the outcome is different. The way you even process it, the way you think about it is different. To speak to the very point that you just talked about, which was protecting your peace.
Oh
If you want to
yes.
protect your peace, what what Dr. Kendra just shared with you, that's the way to protect your peace, because
Mhm.
you got to know, how do I stay calm, cool, and collected when everything around me is rumbling, when the walls feel like they're caving in on me, when somebody's coming at me some kind of way,
Mhm.
or whatever it is that's happening. How do I keep my cool in the midst of that? Well, you keep your cool not because of something that you personally, are doing by yourself, but it's who you're relying upon, who you
Yes.
understand, where your strength comes in, where your encouragement comes in, where's your source of, like you said, of control in the
Mhm.
moment, where you're still human, so it's okay for
Yeah.
you to have your moment, whether that's a
Mhm.
scream, whether that's a cry, whether that's a punching of a bag, whatever.
Mhm.
But you're not going
Mhm.
to stay stuck there. You're not going to allow
Right.
yourself to drown in that moment, because that's where the enemy wants you to be. He wants you to drown in
Mhm.
that, and be all moping around and feeling helpless and hopeless. Well, no, no, I'm just going to say, okay, Lord, I don't know where we're going with this, but I'm ready to hear you, and I'm ready to follow whatever it is that you say to do. It doesn't have to make sense to me. It doesn't have to be, line up with some
Right.
worldly logic. As long as
Mhm.
I know it's coming from you, I know I'm gonna be okay. In
Right.
fact, I know I'm gonna be better than okay. I have,
Mhm.
as you said with your dad singing this, I don't have any doubt about what
Mhm.
is going, how it's going to turn out.
Right. Right.
There's no doubt about it. So that's when you know your peace is at a whole new level. That's when
Oh
you
yeah.
know that just the way you deal with challenging times is at a whole new level. So again, to my listeners, please catch these gems and nuggets that Dr. Kendra is dropping on you, because this is some stuff that you can apply right now if you don't currently have a strategic approach, if you don't currently have a way of figuring that thing out. So with that said, that kind of takes me to my next point. Um, Dr. Kendra, as you reflect back on all your experiences of life, like I said, the highs and lows, the good and the bad, and everything in between, if you had the opportunity to sit across the table from the younger Kendra, when you think about how life was coming up, the devastation of becoming a widow at an early age, and all the other different challenges and moments of adversity that you've encountered, I'm curious to know, what would be your words of encouragement, your words of advisement that you would have loved to have shared with the younger Kendra, that you wish that, if she would have known this back in those times, in those moments, not that it would have made those storms not happen, but maybe it would have allowed her to process and deal with them a little bit more, in a more productive and better way. Or even to those who are listening, we got people who are tuning into this episode that they going through some stuff right now. It might have been some of the things that you've mentioned, or something else right now. And they just don't know how to navigate through that. They're feeling helpless. They're feeling hopeless. They're feeling like, that there's no way for them to overcome. They're feeling defeated. What would be those words of encouragement, those words of advisement to them as well as to the younger Kendra?
Wow. You know, that's something to really think about. I don't know. I think that if I, could speak with my younger self, I think that I just kind of tell her, get suited up and stay suited up. Because it's going to be some turbulence ahead. You're going to go through, a whole lot of things. So like brace yourself and just trust God's storm, and it's that's the way that I feel like that my life has been and where my life has taken me. Thank God that despite the fact that I could not forewarn myself, of what was to come, that God still prepared me, even when it felt like I wasn't prepared for it, even when it felt like it was a storm I couldn't make it through, when it felt like, the whole world was crashing in on me and I was going to throw in the towel. God knew that I was going to be able to make it through. He knew that I would be able to do it. And it really does make you stronger I think we become weaker when we give up in those times of storms and in those times of battle, when we find ourselves throwing in the towel or trying to take a shortcut or going another way, or, trying to improvise or do something other than really go through it. I think we never gain the strength that we were meant to gain by actually trusting God through the storm, and really walking through it and allowing God to bring us out on the side victorious. But I definitely would have given myself, a pre-warning that it's going to be some days ahead. You got some really rough times ahead that you're going to have to deal with. So you need to brace yourself, get suited up, stay suited up, and just brace yourself, for what actually is to come. And so I think that that's good for wherever we are in our walks, even now, even at this age where I am now, or whatever listener may be, watching and listening in, wherever you are now. If you're not already suit up now, because as sure as you keep living, some storms are still going to come, and just be ready for them. And I've gotten to the point where, I pray about everything, Joseph. I just, pray in the more, I pray on my way to work. I was talking to my brother the other day, and I was telling him that I have learned to start praying like in past tense. Like when I'm on my way to work, I'm already praying and saying, God, I thank you for how you kept me all day long. I thank you for
Mm.
how you allowed me to complete every task that you put before me all day long. I thank you for how you kept me healed all day long. I'm not saying, Lord, please keep me healed. Lord, please let me be able to do stuff, but I'm already speaking it by faith that this is the way my going to be, because I'm taking you with me. I'm taking God with me throughout my day. So I just thank you for how you just kept me all day long, how you gave me favor all day long, how you prepared me for every bit of warfare that would rise up all day long, and you brought me out on the other side victorious. And so I think that we need to, like God said is ours, so act like we already got it. That's the way I see it.
Awesome. And I love that. And I think one of the things that kind of summarizes up what you just said, I don't know if you paid attention to our title for the show and to our listeners, is you never have to face it alone. You
Wow.
never have to face it alone.
Hmm.
Um, let go of this mentality that you, as I say, let go of this mentality of you having to put on your Superman cape, your Superwoman cape. If you gotta fix yourself, you gotta take on all the problems. I don't need any help. I got this, and you're just wearing yourself down, carrying a weight and a burden that you don't even have to carry.
Right.
You don't. It doesn't make you look stronger. It doesn't make you look tougher just because you're trying to take on all of that weight and burden. I mean, don't get me wrong. God equipped us with certain skills and abilities to be able to deal with certain things in life, but there's purpose behind him limiting what we can and cannot do, because he wants you to
Hmm.
learn to be dependent upon him. He wants you
Right.
to be reliant upon him, and there's no shame in that, because he's the
Mm.
right source to be reliant upon. If you got to be reliant and dependent upon something or someone, you rather it be him than the moment you go through trials and tribulations that you're dependent upon whatever's in the liquor cabinet, or you're dependent upon
Right.
some other drug of choice, or you're dependent upon some sexual recklessness, or some other type of behavior that may give you temporary relief,
Right.
but it
Hmm.
won't fix the situation. It may give you temporary relief, but it won't promote the healing that you need. It won't allow you to be able to process through whatever that traumatic situation that you faced. And so I love that you pointed out how you, when you talked about praying, that you like basically pray in the past tense, like it's
Hmm.
already happened. I'm already
Yep.
claiming it to happen.
Hmm.
I'm thanking him in advance for what he's about to
Right.
do. And
Hmm.
so this is all we're talking about here, is a mindset shift. So for my listeners, if you're saying I don't know how to process through, one, it begins, of course, with you being dependent on the right source, which is him. But then
Hmm.
also, stepping out on faith and believing that he's going to actually do all that he says that we know that he's capable of doing, that the understanding that nothing is too big for him and that you can give it all
Right.
to him and that you can trust him to work it out. Now, what you have to be careful about, of course, is that as you come to him and take your burdens to him and ask him to deliver you through them, let him do his thing. He's God for a reason. So don't
Right.
go in and ask him for help, in your prayers, and then want to tell him how he's supposed
How
to
to do it right.
do it.
Right.
We can't straddle the fence like that.
Hmm.
It's in those moments where you need to sit still and be ready to receive whatever it is he has to tell you. This is what I need you to do, and everything else I got this handled. In my way, in my timing, and you just got to trust and believe in that. And I know from my own personal experiences, and I'm sure you can say the same, is that when we depended upon him and we let him do his thing, it always played out the way it needed to play
Oh
out. And in
yeah.
fact, it oftentimes was far better than what we had anticipated.
Hmm.
But when we tried to take the wheel, when we tried to run the show, then that's when we tend to either drag out a problem or make it bigger than what it needed to be, or just mess the whole thing up unnecessarily because we were trying to do too much. We got outside of our
Right.
lane. So,
Hmm.
so again, I'm glad that you brought up the points that you mentioned in this segment here. And again, just if you don't remember anything else, listeners, just go to the title. You never have to face it alone. I don't care what it is. You don't have to do it alone.
Amen.
Because again, we have a God that's more than enough
Yeah.
to meet our needs, to take on our burdens, to help us, guide our way through those storms of life, no matter how torrential, no matter how devastating. They cover and protect you. If you don't believe that, all you got to do is tap back into the testimony we heard earlier in the show. If that's not an example of God's protection, I don't know what other better example we could have given you. But trust that there are plenty of them out there. But this
Oh
was
yes.
definitely a powerful one. So again, just trusting and leaning on Him. So Dr. Kendra, this has been an awesome time with you. You have definitely poured into us. I appreciate your transparency, your vulnerability, just being genuine and open and sharing. It has been a blessing to my listeners. It's been a blessing to me as well, and I'm so grateful. I know your schedule is so super busy, and for you to take the time out to do this is beyond appreciated, and I'm just grateful that we were able to make this happen, and of course
Yeah.
grateful that we have other connections that we can have a continuing relationship over and
Absolutely.
beyond the episode. So that's an awesome thing, and I'm thankful for that. But as is customary here on the Blessings in the Streets podcast, we do want to take the opportunity to celebrate you, to acknowledge you, to love on you. So if anything that you got going on professionally and or personally, either going on now or coming up down the road, we want to know all about it. We want to know how to stay connected, how to tap into any products or services that you have, how to just maybe stay in touch with new happenings that will be coming down the pike that people can participate, whether it's virtually or in person. Tell us, what do we need to be keeping up with for Dr. Kendra and what she's got going on that we need to be in the know about?
Well, I mean, I am a pastor, as we talked about earlier. So there are some speaking events that I have coming up, most of which are in the Middle Georgia area. That will be coming up in the next couple of months that I'll be taking part in. What I would like to encourage the listeners to do is to visit my website. Visit my website, which is royaltywriter.net. So that's RoyaltyWriter.net. So royaltywriter.net, and visit there and visit my calendar page, as I am in the process of updating that. Of those things that are actually going on there. I have things going on with my church. And so the name of my church is Deliverance Revival Church. So people can also visit the website for deliverancerevivalchurch.com, and they can see there some ministry events that we have that are coming up on the calendar there. I'm not working on completing a solo project yet, as far as a book is concerned for myself, but I am partnering with another friend of mine who we are putting together a devotional that we're hopeful will be out by the end of this year. And so it's going to be a devotional that is kind of specific for women because it's about friendships and sisterhood. And she and I have been best friends for over 20 years and we're both writers. And so we've endured some things within our friendship. But a lot of times we hear people saying that women cannot be friends, or women, there's always some, drama going on, or always some cattiness, that's actually going on. And so we wanted to kind of address some of those things by way of scripture and by way of our personal experiences and things of that nature that we hope will be edifying and will be a blessing, to others as they actually read the book. But if people would follow me on my social media, my Facebook page, as well as my website pages, to kind of keep abreast of what we have coming up, and kind of be able to connect with us when they can.
That is awesome. That is awesome. And again, for anybody who might be interested in finding out more about Rho Alpha Tau, what is the best way for them to do that?
Anybody wants to know more about Rho Alpha Tau, you can go to rhoalphatau.org. That's RHOLPHATAU.org. And check it out. Everything's there. Like I said, there's nothing hidden at all. So you can see what our mission is. You can see how our beginnings were. You can see what it is that we want to accomplish through this just wonderful, blessed fellowship that God has allowed us to establish. I am so excited about what I feel that God is going to do in Rho Alpha Tau. And so for sure, if you're somebody who believes that this might be something that you would to bring something to, and I don't want anybody to be discouraged if they go to the website and they look at our chapters and you don't see one in your area, because guess what? You can be the person to help us to get one started in your area, because that's what we want to do. We want to spread it and want to be able to have chapters that are represented in all states, and just do the work of God. It's really about the Rho Alpha Tau is a fivefold ministry, and you'll see that when you go onto the website to look at the things that we want to accomplish, these same things that Jesus did as he walked the earth. And so by all means, go there and look that up on the membership page. You can download the membership application and take it from there.
Awesome, awesome. Well, listeners, there you have it. She's giving you all her contact information, how you stay up to date with her calendar of events, tapping into any products or services that she has available, as well as information about Rho Alpha Tau. So please make sure you tap in and soak up all the benefits that you can from this. As you can see, this is a powerful woman of God, and she has a lot to offer. And so don't miss out on the blessings that God is pouring through her, to impact many of you, and being able to do some life changing things, and getting some valuable insight and some valuable information. So I do definitely encourage you to take advantage of that. You will not be disappointed. And for those of you, of course, who are tuning in, of course, I have my latest book that's out right now, Blessings in the Streets Special Edition. Feel free to pick up your copy of that. You can go to Amazon and pick it up, or you can visit my site at mrjosephbrobertscard.com. If you want to secure a autographed copy, reach out to me directly. I'm available on social media platforms. My Facebook page, I have my personal Facebook page, as well as my Blessings in the Streets Facebook page. Feel free to DM me. I'm on TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram. However you want to reach out, we can make that happen as well. So again, we're just here trying to do works that are glorifying God, and just trying to walk in our purpose and doing it the best way we know how, with his guidance, with his direction, just allowing him to use us in mighty ways. And you'll be surprised when you do that, how God will tap into spaces and gifts and talents inside of you that you didn't even know you had. Some things that was never on your bucket list of things to do. I know myself personally, I never imagined being a writer. I never imagined hosting a podcast. I'm sure Dr. Kendra can name off a number of things she never saw doing, but yet here she is, and doing it at a high level. And this is just how God moves. So again, take full advantage of that, because just like it happens for us, the same things can happen for you. And if you've enjoyed our broadcast tonight, enjoyed all that we've talked about, the transparency and sharing of our stories, being encouraging and inspiring, please subscribe, please share, please like, please comment, because again, this is what the Blessings in the Streets podcast is all about: to encourage, to uplift, to inspire. We're not here to present ourselves as being perfect beings who have it all figured out. We're just trying to do things in a way that is pleasing to God, and it begins with you having that relationship with God. dependent upon Him. And if you don't currently have a relationship with God, I'm here to tell you tonight is a mighty fine night to make that decision. And I promise you, it'll be the best decision that you ever made. We're not here telling you something that we heard. We're telling you something that we know from firsthand personal experience. Again, what He's done in our respective lives, He can do that in your life as well. Not only bringing blessings to you, but equipping you to be a blessing to other people. So keep that in mind. Keep our title of the show in mind. You never have to face it alone. God will not leave you, nor will He forsake you. He loves you unconditionally and wants nothing but the best for you. Embrace that relationship. Get close to Him as close as you possibly can and just watch Him do magnificent and miraculous things in your life, well beyond your wildest dreams and imaginations. That's just how good He is, and that's just how much He loves you. So, with that said, remember here at the Blessings in the Streets podcast, this is the place where your story is your glory, where your relationships are relevant, and your journey is your joy. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts, and I thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, you keep fighting that good fight. Keep leaning on God. Keep trusting Him. Quit trying to do it alone, because you don't have to face it alone. Depend upon
Amen.
Him. Allow Him to just take those burdens, take those weights and those pressures off of Him. Get as close as you possibly can. Stay ready. Stay braced. Stay armored up, because the storms are coming. It's not a matter of if, but when. But you can get through that. You can get through those moments of challenges, those moments of storms. But also remember, those storms are not meant to destroy you or take you out. They're opportunities for your growth and for your development. Take full advantage of that and watch God just do His thing through you, and for His kingdom works that He has for you to be a part of, for you to have an active participation in doing the glory of His works, and bringing Him all the praises, all the honor that He is so deserving of. So until next time, you have a great rest of the evening. Take care of yourselves, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah.